everyone. I'm Colleen Rice, and I'm Executive Director at Leadership Medina County. And we're so glad that you've joined us today for this community conversation about what we're doing as a community to come together during this crisis of the coronavirus, and how the community is striking back to come together and help each other out. And we're here today with Daniel Slife. He's the director of the Wadsworth Library. And he and a group of people have been working on an initiative called Wadsworth Knows How. So we wanted to talk with Daniel today about what they are doing in Wadsworth and how, what other kind of initiatives are going on in Medina County that are bringing us together. So Daniel, I'm so excited to learn about your initiative today and to learn more about what Wadsworth knows.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here today. Maybe I'll just start with kind of the very beginning of this, which is Saturday, the 14th of March, when we were looking forward how Wadsworth Public Library was going to be responding as things became increasingly clear, the breadth of the response at the state level throughout the country and what was happening everywhere else in the world. Our plan initially was to try our best to stay open. We were looking at moving into a form of drive-through only service by the middle of that coming week, where we would have strict quarantine zones between different staff functions. And the thing that kind of tipped us to closing quickly on Saturday was that all of a sudden there was this conflicting information about how long the virus could live on objects. And we felt a great deal of responsibility for making sure that we were not a source for the distribution, the communication of the virus in the community. And so we made a decision on the afternoon of Saturday the 14th to close the library with a goal of figuring out how to immediately reopen, actually, some level of curbside service. And so on Saturday and Sunday, we put the message of closure out. And then by Monday, my management team and I were meeting here, and I was working closely with the board president of the library to try to figure out what we could do to reintroduce some level of service. But that idea was kind of flying in the face of what was happening everywhere else. More and more libraries were shutting down completely. And at least the rhetoric and direction coming from the state on this matter was increasingly more stringent. This is back, if you'll recall, when we were hearing much higher projections about how quickly things would be spreading. And I like to think that it's because of the actions we've taken that they did not. And so we quickly abandoned that idea about trying to reopen and moved into another frame of mind. And that was, what are the other things that the library can do when it's not able to directly serve the public, when we're not allowed to welcome people into our doors, when, you know, a service that we feel is essential for the mind is not part of the calculation of an essential service. What is it that we can do? And so the first thing was just the idea of, number one, to be clear-eyed about the scope of what's happening. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Never before has consumer side demand on a global scale simply been put on pause. And to not underestimate the possibility that the ramifications could be long lasting, even after things open up. And so we started to think about, well, with everyone in isolation, one thing we can do is to try to reverse the, you know, when you're alone, when you feel like you're by yourself, if you're cut off from a community, you think about all that social contact that people so quickly lost. That we want to do, firstly, the quickest thing we can do to try to reverse that sense of isolation, because in that space, people become afraid, people become suspicious of their neighbors, people become paranoid. We've had plenty of that in this country as of late. And we thought this was something we could move on quickly. And this is where the idea of starting a grapevine of hope. And the idea was just the grapevine, like, you know, the old gossip chain of people talking, that we felt that with social media is a phenomenal tool that's extremely helpful, and it's been helpful all over this country and world, as you've seen people spreading messages of hope and reconnecting. At the end of the day, though, we also need to make sure that we're helping to cultivate one-on-one connections, responsive human voice to responsive human voice. And so that was the idea, was to start a kind of grapevine of, like playing on the idea of the gossip chain, but a grapevine of hope, of people picking up the phone, opening up their address book and reaching out and talking to their friends, their family, their neighbors, members of their church they haven't seen now in over a month. Back then we were going on a couple of weeks. And then also in that process to recruit people who wanted to be ambassadors for this kind of effort. And I'm looking at our role here, and Sharon Ray was one of the first people. I think she and Sean Van Dyke and Christine Miracle here in our community jumped on very quickly, Cesar Carino, to do that, and to just be an ambassador and reach out and try to encourage other people to not just reach out, but encourage other people to do the same, and to try to encourage that kind of connection. Obviously, we reacted pretty instinctively in this, but when you look around, what we're doing here in Wadsworth with Wadsworth Knows How is not different from what you're seeing happen all over the country. You're seeing people step up, and there was almost an instinctual awareness that this was something we all needed to get ahead of, reconnecting, staying connected with people. So that was like the baseline. But then we started to think more about, well, what else can we do with that? And started to think about the inevitable circumstances where folks who have maybe not been in need may find themselves in need when things open up, as the economy starts to get moving again. And that there will be people making decisions about allocating scarce resources, asking themselves questions like, am I going to feed my children today or fix the toilet? And yeah, you can go on YouTube and look up a video on how to do those things, but building on this idea of building one-on-one connections, reinforcing the fabric of community through interpersonal contact, as limited as we can do it right now. We came up with this idea of Mentor Next Door, of people who have skill or expertise who are willing to be on call on the line to help people out. And we're working through a few more pieces of that puzzle right now. We're getting ready to send out an agreement to all the folks. We have over 35 people stepped up to the plate who want to help. And so we're working through some of those details right now. Obviously, there are legal implications and liability issues. And so we're finalizing some of those, crossing those T's and dotting those I's, and we'll be moving that forward into another phase shortly here, where we're actually putting forward the menu of what's available for folks. But that idea was, again, with all these things, the digital is phenomenal. It's absolutely important. It's critical to how we are responding as a nation and communities, and how we're sustaining ourselves as individuals, but to also bring it down to the ground of a neighborhood, of a community, that if you need help, connect with somebody in your neighborhood, in your community, who can help you, and trying to reinforce and strengthen those relationships. And then beyond that, we started thinking about other things that would arise directly out of need, basic need. We don't ever want to get in the way of successful commerce, where the farmers and the food producers are doing a phenomenal job of sustaining us. We recognize the importance of businesses to be able to sell equipment and tools, but at the same time, we recognize there are going to be a lot of people who are still going to have those needs and not be able to afford them, potentially in the interim period between when we open back up and when things get back to speed economically. And so we came up with two initiatives, one which involves working very closely with the city, which is kind of at a pause right now as we finalize some details, and the other that is mostly the library volunteer initiative. The first is community gardens, trying to help people maintain food security, and also the community aspect of getting people back together again, which, as you know, is a big question mark right now. as we hear messages about whether or not the summer is going to be anything like a summer we've had before. I mean, there's talk about whether or not the zoos will open. I'm sure you've all heard of these things. And so there are a lot of caveats with community gardening, but it arises out of that same idea of the food banks are being overwhelmed. People need to maintain food security, and it's a little thing that can be done in order to get folks connected. I happen to have been blessed with an experience in this area back in the mid 2000s. I was a community volunteer in Lakewood, and got involved with a group of folks who started a group called Leaf Community, Lakewood Earth and Food Community, that was about connecting people with farms, with local food. And my role at that time was to make the connection with the city of Lakewood and establish gardens in the public parks throughout the city. And we were able to do that. So I just happen to have all these policies and garden agreements and experience of kind of troubleshooting those situations. So I reached out to Mayor Lawbaugh and we talked through the possibility. And I should back up at this point and say, before we launched any of this, we were looking for partnership support, mostly at this time in name, for the spirit of what we were doing. And we got a quick sign on from the city of Wadsworth, the Wadsworth City Schools and the Wadsworth Chamber. And there, I think there are going to be ways where absolutely we're going to be able to lean on those organizations and help them also to achieve what they're achieving. But the parks, the community gardens, definitely will rely on heavy involvement of the city. So right now, Robert Patrick, the public services director at the city, is working with their parks manager to look at some potential spots. And in my last conversation with the mayor, we're looking at focusing on a neighborhood kind of model, and where they can easily get water to the gardens. We started recruiting interest for this program. And again, I should say also that we're very much in a capacity building phase for a lot of this. I'll step aside from that and talk about where there is real demonstrable action, but we're largely building capacity right now. We had over a half dozen people with extensive gardening experience sign up who want to lead gardens. We have a growing list of people who want to be gardening. And so our next step in that initiative is, once a shovel-ready site has been identified by the city, we're going to do some appropriately social distance meetings with the people who want to lead gardens and talk through the site and bring them into the loop on the logistics and the next step planning. And so that's one area where we're looking, hopefully by the beginning of next week, if we're going to be able to move through with the gardens, we'll be able to have some very concrete information about that. But it is in a holding pattern right now. And beyond that, and again, in this theme of not wanting to get in the way of commerce, but wanting to be able to support people who are in need, we started putting out the call for people who would be interested in donating tools and equipment in good working order, so that we can start a library of things, where you'd basically come to the library and check out a shovel or a piece of equipment. Now, none of this stuff is unique. These are ideas that have been laying around, so to speak, in the library world for decades now. But ideas that we thought at this time of need would be really salient and something that we could get up and running for our community fairly quickly. The goal with all of this stuff, with Wadsworth Knows How, is not to create additional labor and costs for the library or any other institution, but to create channels so that we can structure, so that we can channel volunteer energy and interest, so that we can give people outlets to help each other. And the library is built on sharing books, sharing movies, sharing programming, and we can extend that model and share equipment. We're looking at doing that in a way that would be volunteer staffed and perhaps even on-demand schedule pickups, so that it's a very lean type of operation. And so that's one where we're also benefited by the fact that the library has a old outreach services building. We still keep some materials in that building and we park our outreach van there, but it has 3 garage bays and a convenient place to come and go to pick up things that might be dirty or heavier machinery. And so we're looking at potentially launching that program out of the outreach services garage here at the library. And then the very last piece of all this was just a resource hub, individuals and families and businesses where we wanted to aggregate the information that's coming in. And I can't say that it's perfect, frankly. There's so much information coming in terms of business aid, but we wanted to have a reasonable starting point. And so when it came to crisis support for individuals or families, at least the mainstay institutions and the main governmental entities where they can go for the latest information. But we included there an extensive list of the faith organizations in our community, all of the churches, food pantries, and anything else that has been relevant. We've received a lot of suggestions from folks to improve those resources. And so trying to get the information consolidated for people. And all of this is about trying to be prepared that I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, you know, if in a best case scenario, Wadsworth Knows How is a faint memory in 3 months, and we don't remember what it is because it's not quite needed. But it's a structure of support that we can activate to help our community to get through whatever might be coming down the road as these events continue to unfold. But it also springs, I should say, from a great deal of hope that I have, that it's in times of crisis and the greater the magnitude of a crisis that we learn how to be a community again. And I'm not just talking about this community, because I think Medina County is a great community, but how we learn how to become a community as a nation, and a nation as part of a world, and that you can see that spirit, and that I'm talking to my neighbors as often as I can. And I just last week had a conversation with one of my next door neighbors who said he's seeing it in people. People are stepping up to help each other. And you know what we're doing here in Wadsworth, you see it happening all over the country. Same spirit, different manifestation of a desire to help out. And I think that, you know, the biggest thing is that it's a time to reconnect and to remind people that at the end of the day, it is all about community, and that we are capable of rolling up our sleeves and solving any problem that may come our way. When we remember that we depend upon each other and we are neighbors, and that's what we're trying to achieve here. That's my 20 minutes.
That was excellent, Daniel, truly excellent. And that leads to, you know, the question, you know, is your neighborhood, and I'm talking to everybody who's participating in this call right now, seeing residents engaged in acts of leadership during this response to COVID-19? You know, Daniel just said that, you know, people are seeing it, and I'm sure you're seeing it too. And we'd like to hear what you're seeing or what you're doing. And we'd like to hear about any questions that you have for Daniel too, about, you know, the process of putting Wadsworth Knows How together, and, you know, anything that might be helpful to start other grassroots initiatives like this throughout our community, throughout our county, throughout our state and our nation and our world, as Daniel was just talking about. So this is at a time that you can participate. You can either put stuff in the group chat, and I will, you know, read those out if they're questions for Daniel, or if you have something that you want to share that you're doing, you can unmute yourself and step on the platform and share what's happening in your neck of the woods. And so Jennifer Brenner says, can we get a library of baking pans and cookware?
That's a great question. I think that, and that's, so as I said before, the idea of a library of things is not a new concept. And just over at the Reed Memorial Library in Ravenna, there is a circulating collection of cake pans. What we're really focusing on right now, I wouldn't rule broadening the scope later, is really like, how can we support the most basic of subsistence needs? How can we, without interfering in the necessary growth of the market, how can we help people to ensure that they maintain their properties? You know, there's a really practical aspect of this, which is just to help people keep that baseline level of community investment going. And we're at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. We're talking about, you know, a safe, secure home. We're talking about food in our bellies. We're talking about that basic level of support. And so that's why we are starting at a really practical level. And so the challenge, I know Jennifer, so I'm thinking she's kind of teasing me too, so I don't want to be too overly analytical in my response to her. So I'll stop there.
You know, yeah, well, Jennifer is a classmate of yours, so yeah, so those are definitely classmate
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, a little bit. But I heard another library was doing the baking pans, and I've seen people posting all of these bread things that they're making now since they have time on Facebook, and I was just curious if you guys had thought about that type of venue. So that's why I asked that. But yeah, it's a little tongue in cheek.
And Eric's asking about yeast.
Yeah. I mean, you know, yeah, where's the yeast?
We're looking for someone to do a webinar on cultivating your own yeast. Are you able to help us out with that?
Eric's shaking his head no at this point. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Stress baking, Radia is saying, what about stress baking? Yes, we all probably bake maybe a little bit too much. Too many sweets around the house. Is that what you're saying, Radia?
Really quickly, I have been stress baking. I've made cookies, I've made banana bread, and yesterday someone posted a Dutch baby on Facebook, and so now that has me interested. So stress
sounds
baking.
like if I maintain proper distance, I can come eat my heart's content worth.
There you go.
This could be a new business venture for you, Radia. You know, some porch drop-offs for some of your baking.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna try that Dutch baby.
Good. I might need to be asking you for that recipe soon, for sure. It does seem like, you know, there are, you know, I was just down in Amish country the other day, and they did have yeast, a pretty good supply of yeast there. So I guess some places have yeast and some places don't. But I know I wanted to make sure I had enough for my baking adventures too, and getting that yeast in my kitchen.
Well, the other thing you can do is you can create your own sourdough starter. And it takes about 7 days. And you can find a recipe online. My wife is getting ready to do this now. I have a friend who did it. You just start with that little bit of flour and water, and you just pull the yeast from the air until you get to that 7th day, and then you can break it off and preserve a core that's like your seed, and you basically, it becomes like a pet in your house that you have to continually feed and care for. So if you want to care for another life right now.
I did read about that, and I've been tempted to try that. Has anyone else tried making your own sourdough starter?
No, I'm not that adventurous.
All right. Well, I might try. So if anybody wants to try with me, we can go at it together. So,
It's a challenge. You're on, Colleen.
okay. All right.
Daniel, I wanted to mention something we're doing in my neighborhood, and I have a lot of young families and rentals in my neighborhood and single gals. So we've been leaving handwritten notes for each other, just checking in, giving each other cell phone numbers, just kind of letting people know, if you need anything, let me know. I'm running to the store. Because it's a little different dynamic than when you have a family at home than when you're by yourself. And the other thing is we are continuing, I had talked to Daniel earlier about several of us are going in and buying gift certificates from some of the local restaurants And then we're handing them out anonymously to different people in the neighborhood saying, hey, we're all in this together. You know, here's a treat. Please use this at your local business and treat your family to a night out. And it's not much, but it's just a little something to look forward to, because I fear this is going to go on for a while.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sharon. Yeah, and it's just so, I mean, that's the thing that is so heartening about this, that you're seeing that that kind of action is happening and people are just doing stuff. And I mean, it shows you that when pushed up against the wall, what is our instinct? And you can read the digital post, the Wadsworth Post, which unfortunately went digital right when some of our most isolated folks who don't have digital access most really need it. But they were their hands were somewhat tied from what I understand. But they've been doing their surveys, and overwhelmingly, people are on the same page about the non-divisive questions related to all of this. I mean, something like 80% plus in terms of support of what we're all doing to combat this challenge. And so it's really fascinating. You know, one thing that I wanted to mention kind of following up Sharon is that Grapevine of Hope initiative that we started, it's also kind of taken on a life of its own, where a couple people who had signed on to be ambassadors of hope, they wanted to do other things. And so one went and Sharon actually is a great example. She went and she got together with a group of people and they started just directly addressing need and helping people. And then a couple of other ones are more promotional oriented. One is Catherine Maricola, a Wadsworth resident, a business consultant here in town who has a show on WCTV. She wanted to do an inspirational video campaign. So we said, go for it. That's easy. Let's fold that in. And so they did that. And Sean Van Dyke, an administrator at the high school here, took the lead on organizing a community-wide car parade. And that social media post promoting that thing is the most active thing we have ever seen on our page. It's phenomenal. People are just really excited to be a part of it. So this Saturday at 2 p.m., hopefully our community is going to be swarmed with beeping, decorated cars, horns ablaze, driving through all of the neighborhoods as part of this campaign. And if any of you are interested in being a part of that, you can find that on our website. You can actually go to wadsworthknowshow.org, and that will take you to the page on the library's website to find out more about that.
That's great. We can send out all the links when we send out the recording of this too, Daniel. So if there's any links you want me to include in that email, I'll be happy to share those with everybody, and definitely also include those links on the recording, you know, in print, so that if anybody who's watching the recording would like to visit those sites, we can steer them over to that way. Eric has an interesting comment. He says, one of my older neighbors is making masks en masse to distribute. So that's another thing that we're definitely seeing in Medina County. And I see a lot of people aren't even charging. They're just saying, you know, I'm making these masks and, you know, we'll provide them free of charge to anybody who needs one. That's a good addition. Something I was excited about too that you were talking about earlier, Daniel, was the community gardens. And I think in a prior conversation that you and I had, you had been working with a bunch of institutions in Wadsworth to find land to have these community gardens. So you're not just talking about one garden, right?
Well, yeah, my ambition has been clipped a bit, but the goal is to be more broad. And I think the thing that really is kind of slowing us down here is that there's a lot of hesitance out there to create a place where people are going to be physically together working. And we were also initially reaching out to the churches, but you can understand how, you know, they have their own situations that they're dealing with their congregants right now. It's faith leaders have been some of the most difficult folks to get a hold of for anything beyond taking care of their flock right now, and the broader community, I should say. They've been putting so much energy into food distribution and connecting people with those types of resources that I had to kind of take a rain check on bothering them about community gardens for the time being. But that will be further down the road here. That will definitely be on the radar. And we have some preliminary interest, but it seems like the priorities are just not quite aligning. So we're really hoping at this point to focus with the city and the parks kind of model, the neighborhood park model, and see if we can get a shovel-ready project or two off the ground. The challenge here is just going to be trying to do these things under social distance orders when you need to be breaking ground, when you need to have a team of people working. We had a couple of landscapers step up to the plate and offer to till the earth for us, and a garden center step up to the plate to offer to help out in any way that they could as well. So there's definitely interest and support, but I'm kind of hedging and cautious that depending on what kind of direction we get from the governor and what the opening up orders actually look like, whether we can actually pull this off this particular spring. And so we're ready to do it if we can, but the scope may be limited at this time, and we might be looking further down the road to have something more broad come out of this.
Well, Terry's saying this is great stuff you're leading for your community, Daniel. And, I have to echo that for sure. This is exciting. Is anyone else hearing about any kind of other community garden projects? I know there was one in Medina that they started last year. I think that's kind of over by the Medina County District Library, and hoping to see some action with that this summer to help the community. Is anyone else seeing any community garden works happening? Well, I'm hoping to hear some for sure. And I love the library of things too. That's just amazing. I agree with Jen. That would be nice to have some of those pots and pans, those things you're not sure you really want to buy yet, or you need that you would use enough to necessitate that. I think that's pretty amazing. This idea almost seems a little bit overwhelming. Do you have any advice for anybody who might want to start something like this in one of their communities, Daniel?
I would say that it's an experiment. It's a time when it's okay to be experimental, and don't be afraid to try something that may fail, or to start with a big idea that might run aground on the practical reality of the situation. We have to start somewhere, and we have to try. And the most important thing is what's the compass, what's guiding you, why are you doing it? And if you stay true to that, you'll figure out what you can do. We've just received such positive support on all of this from anybody that we've talked to, my staff have interacted with, the institutions that are engaged in this work in the community. And just, I think the big thing is just being flexible and adaptive. It's gonna, I had a big vision of community gardens everywhere very quickly. And some of that came out of my own anxiety and frankly fear when things initially shut down. I tend to look at things with a long view, and I could see I could see a big struggle ahead of us. And it's important to translate that anxiety and fear into something positive and constructive. And then the reality will probably land somewhere closer to the middle, which it seems to be so far. And so we won't have gardens everywhere in the city. That's probably not going to happen, but we might have a couple pilot projects for this summer. And that might be something that proves to be more broadly applicable in the community and something that there's support for that could always grow. The Library of Things may not be a massive operation, but are we going to be able to help some people to solve some practical problems with a little investment and some sharing in the community? I think so. And I know that we're making a big impact with the Grapevine of Hope initiative because I'm hearing about it every single day. And right now, when we can't be together, we can't physically be together. That is the absolute most important thing that we can do. And those of us that have the luxury of resources, of time and financial resources that we can donate to food banks and other areas where there is a great and rising need right now. That's the easiest way for us to lead right now, and we should all be doing that on some level, if we can.
That's definitely fantastic. I love the visuals, for the Library of Things and the Grapevine of Hope. That just puts such a vision in my mind of that grapevine. And I don't know if you all think that way too, but every time you say that, I get a really positive visual and some serotonin's going. And so that's a good thing.
Mission accomplished.
There we go. That's a good thing.
We are trying to spread serotonin.
There, good. Serotonin for all, maybe not yeast for all, but definitely some serotonin for all. So, does anyone else have anything to add before we close up our program today? Just want to make sure we get an opportunity for anybody who has something they want to share. Well, Daniel, this has just been outstanding. You have provided just a boatload of information for us today, and I think your ship's definitely going in the right direction. And, now that we know that there's an initiative like this going on, we know that we can come to you and get some good information and inspiration to do our own initiatives, even if it's just something small like the Grapevine of Hope of sharing with others in our community, like Sharon Ray was sharing earlier about the gift cards, or just little things that we can do like making masks and sharing our yeast with others. These are all good things that will help Medina County move forward. And I hope that all of you are going to walk away today inspired to do something in your neighborhood and in your community. Even if it is just a small act of kindness to someone in your neighborhood, or it may be something a little bit bigger, like what Daniel's been working on. So I hope you all have a wonderful week, and that you continue to lead in the way that you can, and that you, spend some time on yourself too. Give yourself some self-love, and make sure that you're getting that serotonin flowing for some positive energy. And thank you all again for participating. We're going to be doing another one of these next week, and we'll be releasing that information soon. But again, if you ever have any ideas about things that you'd like to see on our Lunch and Learn program, please send them my way. I'd love to hear your ideas and get them going. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Colleen. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Leadership Medina County inspires and equips leaders to be better and do better. Learn more at www.leadershipmedinacounty.org.